In the heart of Rome, a colossal stone chalice never fails to astonish those who witness it for the first time. From one perspective, the structure appears whole, impossibly powerful, its tiered wall towering over the modern city. But take only a few dozen steps and the vista shifts dramatically. A vast portion of the outer wall is simply gone, exposing the skeletal interior of corridors and empty passages. Gazing upon these jagged, broken edges, it is difficult to imagine that this amphitheater was once a perfectly symmetrical and unbroken ring. Of its former majesty, only a husk remains, a fractured relic against a backdrop of urban life. We have grown accustomed to calling this the natural work of time, but behind every empty niche and each missing block of travertine, there is a specific, violent event. The true mystery is not that it fell, but how? Where did millions of tons of heavy stone vanish, and why did one side endure while the other collapsed into ruin? To comprehend the scale of this loss, we must envision the Colosseum in its pristine state. This was no mere arena. It was the ultimate symbol of imperial triumph. Its construction began in the year 70 of the Common Era and was completed in a breathtaking 8 years. A timeline that seems impossibly short even by the standards of modern technology. Thousands of laborers heaved enormous blocks of white stone into place. The entire edifice was clad in gleaming travertine slabs, which shone so intensely in the sun they would have blinded passers-by. In those days, the amphitheater was not a gray ruin, but a sparkling, snow-white mountain in the center of the. Its builders used no cement or mortar to bind the exterior walls. The heavy stone blocks were simply laid one upon another, relying on their own immense weight and perfectly engineered edges. To prevent such a structure from shifting, special grooves were carved into the stone, into which powerful iron clamps were inserted. These braces, a hidden metal skeleton, stitched the building together from within. An estimated 300 tons of valuable iron were used, a resource that would, centuries later, inspire a relentless hunt. Inside, the opulence was even greater. The seating for the nobility was faced with pure marble, while every arch on the second and T-stands, a complex marvel of engineering designed to shield 50,000 spectators from the unforgiving Roman sun. This was not a building, it was a declaration, a wonder of the world built to proclaim that even the most audacious visions could be rendered in stone. But even stone can be silenced. It was conceived as an eternal monument, a structure of travertine and tuff engineered to defy the centuries. But the promise of eternity, great Flavian amphitheater, collapsed. In that moment of ruin, the Colosseum ceased to be an icon of the state and entered a profound vacuum, transforming into a kind of uncharted territory in the very heart of Rome. Here, one of the most surreal chapters in its long history began. The immense vacant arches, once roaring conduits for the Roman masses, began a slow metamorphosis. They did not simply fall into disuse, they were colonized. Imagine walking the streets of medieval Rome and witnessing the impossible. Within the husk of antiquity's greatest arena, laundry is strung between arches that once framed an emperor's entrance. Smoke curls from makeshift chimneys carved into its ancient stones, and on the very arena floor, livestock grazes peacefully. This was no fleeting occupation by the desperate and the homeless. This was the birth of a city within a city, an organic, vertical settlement with its own streets, its own commerce, its own unwritten laws. Within the stone vaults, ordinary people erected wooden scaffoldings and floors, dissecting the soaring passageways into 2 or even 3 distinct levels. These became peculiar multi-story dwellings. On the ground floor, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer might echo from a forge, or a cobbler might mend shoes. Above, in the cramped but secure quarters, his family would live out their days. Archival records from the period confirm this was not an anarchic squat. These strange apartments were officially leased, rented, and even sold. Influential Roman families laid claim to entire sections of the Colosseum, treating to warehouses, stables, and even small consecrated chapels tucked away in the cool darkness. And the arena, the legendary stage of gladiatorial combat, was buried. The blood-soaked sand vanished under tons of earth, transformed into a vast communal garden. Here, residents cultivated vegetables and fruits, the towering, unbroken walls of the northern facade serving as a perfect shield against the wind. In these years, the Colosseum resembled a colossal human anthill, where life teemed in every surviving corner. Instead of emperors and senators, children chased one another up its grand staircases. Instead of the roar of lions, one heard the rhythmic strike of the craftsman's mallet and the lowing of cattle. This intimate cohabitation, however, came at a devastating cost. To make their homes more comfortable, the inhabitants hammered new doorways and windows directly through the ancient Roman masonry, compromising the very integrity of the structure. They pried marble slabs from the tribunes, repurposing them as crude tabletops or foundation stones. The amphitheater's majestic form was gradually lost, consumed by parasitic additions of brick, wood, and it was a period of chaotic, piecemeal destruction, perhaps more damaging than any formal quarrying. While popes and nobles would later haul away its stones by the cartload for their palaces, these residents chipped away at it from the inside, a slow and steady erosion. They were adapting a wonder of the world to the humble scale of their own lives. To the medieval mind, this was not a sacred relic of a fallen empire. It was a quarry, a fortress, a prefabricated mountain of stone offering ready-made caves that were dry, defensible, and safe. This domestic colonization endured for centuries. It is the reason the inner corridors today appear so jagged, so scarred, and so uneven. The ruins we see are not merely the work of time and earthquakes. They are a testament to the relentless, untidy, and enduring human need for shelter. A story written not in imperial decrees, but in the simple, profound act of making a home. As archaeologists peeled back the layers of time, long after the last gladiators had fallen, they discovered a startling truth within the Colosseum's walls. Here, embedded in the ancient concrete, were the ghosts of a different life. The soot-stained remnants of chimneys, the faint outlines of medieval kitchens. For centuries, this monument to imperial power had not been a ruin, but a home. Its tiered seating and vaulted corridors repurposed into a vertical slum, a city within a city. In the 13th century, this transformation took on a militant edge. A powerful Roman family, the Frangipani, seized the amphitheater, converting it into their personal fortress. They sealed its majestic archways with brick and stone, creating a bastion against their rivals. This act of appropriation, born of ambition, inadvertently became an act of preservation, shielding a portion of the structure from the ravages of time. But its reprieve was fleeting. Once the family's power waned, new masters of Rome looked upon the Colosseum not with awe, but with cold calculation. It was a costly indulgence, a relic whose true value now lay in its materials. Thus began an era historians call the official dismantling. This was not the chaotic looting of a fallen city. It was a systematic, state-sanctioned deconstruction. A meticulous government machine was put into motion, issuing contracts to builders and entrepreneurs. These documents granted them the legal right to harvest a specified quantity of stone in exchange for a share of the profits or services rendered to the city, and of rubble formed on the site. Romans called this place the Stone Forest. Here, every block of precious travertine was numbered, catalogued, and prepared for its journey. To stand in Rome 500 years ago would be to witness an endless, grinding procession. Ox-drawn carts, groaning under the weight of history, slowly dragged the Colosseum, piece by piece, toward new construction sites across the city. It was the gradual dismemberment of a titan, a giant of antiquity that could no longer resist its fate. One of the most common routes led directly to the banks of the river Tiber. There, the stones that once echoed with the roar of the crowd were used for the mundane work of building port facilities and reinforcing the riverbanks against seasonal floods. But the most astonishing reincarnation of the Colosseum stone occurred in the heart of the city, with the construction of the Palazzo Venezia. This majestic building is not merely decorated with the amphitheater's remains, it is born from them. Its foundations, its massive external walls, even its internal structures were fashioned from the same white travertine that once formed the Colosseum's brilliant facade. When one gazes upon its powerful ramparts today, one is, in fact, looking at the missing southern wall, resurrected in a new form. Its address simply changed. The same fate befell countless other structures at the hands of Rome's noble families. The Barberini were so prolific in their quarrying that a bitter saying was born. What the barbarians did not do, the Barberini did. With the Pope's blessing, this aristocratic family hauled away enough material to construct an entire city quarter. Yet fragments of the Colosseum traveled even farther than these famous palaces. In perhaps the greatest irony of all, enormous blocks of its travertine were transported across the city to a site of immense spiritual significance. They were used to build St. Peter's Basilica, the principal shrine of the Catholic world. The very stones that formed an arena of pagan spectacle, a place where early Christians may have met their end, were now foundational to the most sacred cathedral in Christendom. The Colosseum, then, never truly vanished. It was not destroyed so much as it was dissolved, its physical body broken down and absorbed into the bloodstream of a new Rome. Its stones no longer contain the spectacle of the games, but they carry the weight of papal ambition, the commerce of the river, and the foundations of the Renaissance. The monument did not die. It became the city itself, a silent, scattered testament to the relentless truth that the future is always built from the bones of the past. The slow dismantling of the Flavian amphitheater was an enterprise of colossal scale. To transport its heavy stones, a new infrastructure of disappearance had to be engineered. Temporary bridges were thrown across the Tiber, ancient roads reinforced, groaning under the unprecedented weight of hewn travertine blocks, each a piece of a fallen world. Even the celebrated Ponte Cestio, a bridge walked by thousands each day, holds a secret within its core. Beneath layers of later stonework lie particles of the Colosseum's grandstands, a hidden testament to this city-wide act of cannibalization. But this process of repurposing was not always gentle. While the larger blocks were granted a second life, forming the walls of new palaces and fortifications, the smaller fragments and decorative elements met a far more violent fate. Along the roads leading away from the amphitheater, a new industry emerged, born from its decay. Special kilns burned day and night, their voracious fires fed by the sublime. Exquisite marble capitals, fragments of statuary, and inscribed slabs were cast into the inferno, sacrificed to be rendered into lime. It was the most economical method of producing high-quality mortar for the walls of ordinary brick homes. Priceless marble, once gleaming in the Roman sun, was thus reduced to dust and construction adhesive. An almost unimaginable volume of the world's finest stone became the binding agent for new churches and noble residences. This explains the stark reality we witness today. The raw, concrete skeleton of the Colosseum, stripped of its finery. Everything of perceived value was either repurposed or incinerated for purely practical gain. The Colosseum, therefore, did not simply vanish into ruin. It was meticulously deconstructed, its essence absorbed and integrated into the very flesh of modern Rome. But why was this one structure so persistently quarried? The answer lies first in the sheer quality of the material. The ancient Romans had built with a travertine limestone of such density and integrity that, with the passing of centuries, it only grew stronger. To work with it was a mason's dream. Structures built from it were meant to endure for eternity. Yet a deeper reason lies in the mindset of the age. The modern concept of historical preservation did not exist. For the citizens of medieval and Renaissance Rome, the Colosseum was not a treasured monument, but a looming relic of a dark, pagan past. Its only utility was as a quarry, a vast, open warehouse of pre-cut, superior-grade building material. Its stones were even used for the staircases of common residential houses. To this day, in the cellars of old Roman buildings, one can stumble upon characteristically curved blocks, unmistakably once part of the arena's tiered seating or vaulted corridors. Yet the scavengers were not interested in stone alone. A far more precious resource lay hidden deep within the structure: the iron clamps that bound the great blocks together. An era of great plundering began, a frantic treasure hunt not for gold, but for metal. Men armed with chisels and hammers swarmed the walls, methodically attacking the joints to extract the valuable iron. If you gaze upon the Colosseum today, its surface appears ravaged, covered by thousands of holes. A common misconception holds these to be the scars of cannonballs or bullets from some forgotten war. The truth is more intimate, more revealing of the city's needs. Each pockmark is the wound left by a medieval chisel, a ghost of a hand that reached into the past to pull out the iron sinews holding the giant together. The city literally grew from the bones of its greatest symbol, transforming a monument to spectacle and death into the foundation for new life. It is a stark reminder that history is not a static object to be viewed from a distance, but a living resource, perpetually consumed and reborn in the endless, hungry construction of the future. Its age of spectacle had passed. A new era had begun for the great amphitheater, an era of salvage. Rome, a city built upon its own ruins, turned its gaze inward, and the Colosseum became its most valuable quarry. A new breed of hunter emerged from the city's labyrinthine streets, men who sought not game, but metal. With specialized long drills and heavy chisels, they worked a grim trade. These masters of demolition could feel the hidden veins of iron within the travertine blocks, the immense clamps and pins that were the secret to the structure's strength. They would bore into the stone, chipping away a path until they reached their prize. It was a perilous, exhausting task. Sometimes the massive blocks, their integrity compromised, would crack and fall, leading to tragic incidents. But the hunger for resources, the need to forge a horseshoe, a knife, or a simple tool, was a force more potent than fear. With every iron clamp wrenched free, the building grew weaker. It was being stripped of its very skeleton, its internal armature dismantled piece by piece. The immense weight of the structure, once perfectly distributed, began to press down upon a hollowed frame. The Colosseum started to crumble under its own mass. Slowly, inexorably, the perfect closed ring of the arena gave way, collapsing in sections until it began to resemble the broken horseshoe we recognize today. To the people of that time, this was not an act of vandalism. It was logic, a simple and necessary recycling of the old to serve the needs of the new, undertaken with no sense of the architectural masterpiece they were unmaking. As the physical structure eroded, something else began to fill the void. The hollowed-out corridors and shadowed archways became fertile ground for urban legends. Ghostly tales and mysterious stories took root, frightening passers-by who dared to venture near after dusk. Local folklore imbued the empty passages with a mystical atmosphere, whispering of a connection to a violent and spectral past. Stories circulated of strange, unearthly sounds emanating from the great breaches in the walls, a lament for the blood once spilled upon the sand. This growing aura of dread slowed the piecemeal dismantling by the common folk, but it did not deter the true powers of the city. The church and the aristocracy saw not a haunted ruin, but a boundless repository of fine materials. They continued to carve away the choicest sections of marble to adorn their new basilicas and private villas. The plunder was systematic, conducted on an industrial scale. A single report from the era documents 40 cartloads of the purest white marble being hauled away in one expedition, destined not for a public work, but for the opulent decoration of a private fountain. It was a time when the Colosseum was literally melting away under the searing Italian sun, its form dissolving from a perfect circle into a fractured crescent. Yet, an even more astonishing turn of fate awaited. By the 18th century, the arena resembled not a building, but a lost world. In the absence of human industry, nature had reclaimed it. Trees grew to maturity within the vaulted passageways, their roots gripping the ancient stonework. The walls became a vertical garden, covered in rare and exotic species of plants, a unique ecosystem so rich that botanists came to study it as a marvel in its own right. But for most, it was simply a place of decay, a convenient dumping ground for the city's refuse. The monument was dying. It was then that Pope Benedict XIV intervened. He made a move of profound strategic genius, an act that today would be hailed as a masterstroke of public relations. To halt the relentless quarrying and desecration, he consecrated the ground. He proclaimed the Colosseum a sacred site, a memorial to the countless Christian martyrs he declared had met their end within its walls. Modern historians note that direct evidence for mass executions of Christians, specifically inside the Colosseum, is scarce. But the historical accuracy of the claim was less important than its power. In a single moment, the building's identity was transformed. It ceased to be a free quarry of stone and iron. It became a shrine. The walls, which had been powerless against chisels and drills, were now protected by an armor of sanctity. The amphitheater was saved not by engineers or armies, but by an idea. It stands today, less a testament to the empire that built it, and more a monument to the many lives it has lived since. A reminder that the survival of a place often depends not on the strength of its foundations, but on the power of the stories we choose to tell about it. The arena of spectacle was consecrated. its blood-soaked earth transformed into an open-air sanctuary. Crosses were mounted upon its ancient walls, and a new decree was issued. The quarrying of its stone was no longer mere theft, but sacrilege, an affront to the divine. For the first time in recorded history, a ruin was not preserved for its imperial grandeur or its architectural beauty, but for fear of God's wrath. This shield of faith is the sole reason even half its facade greets the modern world. Without this sanctification, the final stones of the Flavian amphitheater would have long ago been ground into the foundations of a forgotten palace or mortared into a garden wall. The Colosseum would exist only as a ghost in the city's memory. Yet even as the monument was sanctified above ground, its deepest secrets lay buried below, waiting for the age of reason. During the first scientific excavations of the 19th century, archaeologists broke through the arena floor and unveiled a subterranean labyrinth. They had discovered the hypogeum, a complex two-story network of tunnels, chambers, and elevators. This was the hidden engine of the games. These intricate mechanisms, powered by hundreds of slaves and technicians, allowed for the sudden appearance of wild beasts and elaborate stage sets, materializing from the ground as if by magic. It is a staggering thought. Beneath the sand where men fought for their lives, a hidden city of machinery and manpower toiled in the darkness, engineering the spectacle above. These lower levels, ironically, survived the centuries far better than the sunlit arches. Buried for ages under layers of earth and debris, they were perfectly embalmed, a time capsule sealed away from the scavengers and the elements. When we gaze today upon the empty sockets of its broken arcades, we understand that the missing half of the Colosseum did not simply vanish. It dissolved into the very fabric of Rome. Its travertine blocks form the foundations of St. Peter's Basilica. Its strength supports the bridges spanning the Tiber. Its bricks and marble are embedded in the walls of private villas and papal palaces. The city had literally devoured its greatest monument to build itself anew. For centuries, a question haunted observers. Why did the structure collapse with such strange surgical precision? Viewed from the heavens, the break is an almost perfect line dividing a monolithic, towering wall from a cascade of picturesque ruins. Popular legend held it was the hand of a higher power striking down the southern half as a final judgment upon the city for the cruelties once celebrated within. But scientists, armed with modern instruments, discovered a far more terrestrial explanation. The answer was not in the sky, but deep within the earth. When the ancient engineers chose this site, they committed a fatal error, one invisible to the naked eye. The amphitheater was erected upon the drained basin of a former lake, and the ground beneath it was a geological trap. The northern section, which stands almost perfectly preserved, rests upon a dense, stable shelf of limestone, a form of natural concrete that has held its foundation immobile for millennia. But the southern side, where the great wound now gapes, was built directly over the softest part of the old lake bed. Though the builders drained the water and poured a massive concrete foundation, they could not change the treacherous subsoil of clay and sand beneath. Over the centuries, through tremors and the slow, relentless pull of gravity, the earth shifted. The monument was torn apart, not by divine retribution, but by a flaw set in stone nearly 2,000 years ago. It stands as a testament not only to the ambition of an empire, but to the humbling, inescapable power of the ground on which our greatest works are built. It was meant to last an eternity, built upon a foundation of deep concrete and imperial pride. But nature proved to be a more cunning architect. The colossal structure, weighing hundreds of thousands of tons, was unwittingly built upon a geological trap. One side rested on a solid, stable shelf of rock, while the other sat upon what was, in essence, a soft pillow of unstable alluvial sediment. Over the centuries, the soft soil beneath the southern wall compacted and shifted, transforming into a kind of sponge. With every seismic tremor that rippled through the Italian peninsula, the northern arc stood immovable, anchored to the earth. But the southern face, resting on its soft cushion, would oscillate, swaying with a deadly rhythm. Sooner or later, it was destined to fracture precisely at its heart. The first true test arrived in the middle of the 5th century, when a powerful earthquake shook Rome to its core. The city walls groaned and homes dissolved into dust. Within the Colosseum, the first ominous fissures appeared, jagged lines tracing the immense stress. The southern side began its slow, inexorable descent. Imperial authorities rushed to patch the wounds, filling the cracks with brick and mortar, but restoring its original strength was an impossible task. The structure became a wounded leviathan, awaiting a final, merciful blow. For hundreds of years, it endured in this precarious state, a fragile giant still maintained by a civilization that valued its symbolism. But with the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the age of monumental maintenance came to an end. The great amphitheater was abandoned to the elements, its slow decay mirroring the fading memory of the empire that built it. The true end of the old Colosseum arrived in September of 1349. That year, a cataclysmic earthquake tore through central Italy, a disaster that seemed to turn the world upside down. The tremors did not cease for several days. The southern outer wall, perched upon its weak foundation for over a millennium, could withstand no more. With a deafening roar that echoed through the depopulated city, thousands upon thousands of tons of elite travertine stone cascaded to the earth, burying the plaza in a mountain of rubble. In a single, violent moment, the perfect, unbroken ring of the Flavian amphitheater was shattered forever. This event transformed not only the structure, but humanity's relationship with it. Where once it had inspired awe, fear, and respect, it now became a colossal, open-air quarry. The citizens of Rome realized they no longer needed to travel to distant quarries or spend fortunes on hewing new stone. Here, at their feet, lay a limitless supply of perfectly dressed, ready-to-use building blocks. It was the point of no return. The building began to be dismantled, piece by piece. Anyone with a cart could arrive and haul a piece of history home, to build a humble shed or to fortify a family palace. Nor was it only the stone. The iron clamps that bound the blocks together, a fortune in metal, were prized plunder, gouged from the walls, leaving behind the pock-marked scars we see today. It is a profound irony that this very cataclysm sculpted the iconic silhouette recognized across the globe. The northern face, anchored to solid ground, survived every shock, remaining tall and majestic. The southern side was reduced to a low, fractured ruin. Its internal anatomy, its vaulted corridors and tiered passageways, laid bare to the sky. Today, the Colosseum stands as the world's largest puzzle, a colossal jigsaw of stone and memory. It is a monument not only to the power of an empire, but to the far greater, more patient power of the earth itself. A permanent reminder that even the most enduring symbols of human ambition rest upon foundations they cannot fully command. Approach the Flavian amphitheater, and a strange truth reveals itself. Where the monumental outer wall abruptly ceases, vast brick ramparts stand guard. they are not original. They are stern, unyielding buttresses built in the 19th century. Looking cades, the iconic face of the Colosseum would have long ago succumbed to gravity, collapsing into the same dust as their missing half. This was a landmark intervention, perhaps the first great act of architectural preservation on such a scale. It was the moment humanity collectively realized that without a conscious effort, the eternal symbol of the eternal city was destined to become little more than a quarry of broken stone. But the most profound struggle for its survival is not in the past. It is happening now, in the relentless rhythm of the 21st century. Modern Rome is a vibrant, chaotic metropolis, a city of roaring buses, of a metro system burrowing through ancient earth, and of millions of feet treading its historic pavement. And for these ancient stones, this modern life is a creeping existential threat. Each time a subway train rumbles through the tunnels deep beneath, a tremor, almost imperceptible to a human, travels through soil and stone. For the colossal blocks of travertine, weighing many tons and no longer bound by the iron clamps plundered centuries ago, this subtle vibration is a recurring nightmare. The entire structure breathes. With each passing train, with the daily shifts in temperature and humidity, its ancient bones expand and contract. These microscopic movements, repeated millions of times, work their way into old fissures, gradually, inexorably, widening the cracks. To watch over this slow-motion cataclysm, scientists and engineers have affixed hundreds of high-sensitivity sensors across its walls. They are the monument's nerve endings, recording every minute shift, every subtle strain in real time. The data streams in, world. Not long ago, a bold experiment was proposed. Could the Colosseum be restored to its original, complete form? The idea was tantalizing, a dream of resurrecting a lost world. But engineers quickly collided with a harsh reality. Modern materials are fundamentally incompatible with ancient stone. To fill the voids with contemporary concrete would be to sign a death warrant. The new material expands and contracts at a different rate than the original travertine limestone. It would fight against the ancient structure, tearing the walls apart from within. So, the restorers have chosen a different, more delicate path. Instead of rebuilding, they are revealing. Using specialized lasers, they meticulously cleanse the facade of the accumulated grime of centuries. A beam of pure light passes over the stone, vaporizing the dark crust of soot and smog without ever harming the surface beneath. And under that blackened shell, a color unseen for generations emerges, the warm, luminous travertine that the citizens of Imperial Rome would have recognized 2,000 years ago. And yet, the missing half of the Colosseum has not vanished entirely. It still speaks. During renovations of old palazzos and churches in the heart of Rome, workers will often unearth massive, dressed stones bearing the distinctive square holes where those iron clamps once held them fast. These are the lost bones of the amphitheater, scattered across the city, repurposed over centuries. Rather than being discarded, the city's authorities now endeavor to bring these orphans home. Reinserting them into the structure is impossible, but they are laid to rest in the archaeological park surrounding the arena, silent reminders of the grandeur that was. It creates a strange, pervasive sense. To walk through Rome is to understand that the city is a living mosaic, built from its own past. The Colosseum is not merely a monument within the city. Its very essence is infused in the foundations of the buildings all around it. a constant, physical echo of a fallen glory that refuses to be forgotten. The very bones of the amphitheater live on, scattered across the eternal city. One might sip coffee in a cafe whose foundations were laid with stones that once echoed with the clash of steel and the roar of the crowd. A mystical connection seems to bind the fate of the Colosseum to the destiny of Rome itself, captured in an ancient prophecy. While the Colosseum stands, the warning goes, Rome shall stand. When the Colosseum falls, Rome shall fall. And when Rome falls, so falls the world. For us, this structure has become the ultimate measure of our ability to preserve history. The story of its missing half is a stark lesson in how the greatest works of humanity must bow before the power of the elements and the pragmatism of their descendants. The process began with a geological flaw, a catastrophic error that was sealed into its foundations. Devastating earthquakes then tore it asunder, transforming the grand arena into a colossal stone quarry for a needy Rome. Its pieces were not merely erased by time. They were repurposed, reborn in the walls of churches, the facades of palaces, and the arches of bridges we cross each day. The city, in essence, devoured its own past to build its future. The jagged edges and empty spans we see today are not simply scars of destruction, but a unique testament to this relentless cycle of urban reinvention. Had it survived whole, it might appear as just another concrete stadium. But in its magnificent imperfection, it tells a far greater story of survival. We see not just architecture, but the deep impressions left by both nature and humanity. It is these wounds that have made it an eternal symbol, a haunting reminder of the fragility of civilization and the inexorable passage of time.